Revolutionary findings now show that some American Indians have mitochondrial DNA markers which are also only found in Europe, showing prior mixing with Europeans between 12,000 and 36,000 years ago.
I think I will let Professor Murphy, chair of the Department of Anthropology at EDCC, do the basic explanation as to why haplotype X in Native Americans is not an indication of a European presence.
The connections that exist, such as that of haplogroup X, are from about 25,000 years ago. What you should show, if American Indians came from Europeans, what we should show is that the same haplogroups that we find in the Americas are the same haplogroups that exist in Europeans. But A, B, C, and D, the four main haplogroups that account for 98% of American Indians, are not found in Europeans. Okay, only one of those X is found there, and that one's far too old. Jeff Lindsay argues that the X haplogroup might be evidence of a connection with American Indians. He's made that argument despite the evidence that now clearly shows that the X haplogroup is found in Siberia. Or his argument requires that, in a sense, this one haplogroup that happens to have a few similarities with Siberians, American Indians, and Europeans, that itself is evidence. The problem with his scenario is that you can actually break down the haplogroup X into different categories, okay, different haplotypes. Okay? And these haplotypes, in a sense, tell us a history of haplogroup X. The haplogroup X that is found in Europeans is of a different strand than that found in American Indians. That's how we come up with the date of 25,000 years ago, or because of those differences. The Siberian haplotypes of haplogroup X are in between those of American Indians and those of Europeans, when it should be the other way around. If the American Indians came from Europeans, then it should be the European haplotypes that are more similar to the American Indians, not the Siberian ones. Siberian haplotypes of haplogroup X are between American Indians and Europeans, so that it shows that they had to have come from Siberia, not from Europeans.
Furthermore, in Kivisold's groundbreaking study of haplogroup X, they stated clearly in 2003 that when they surveyed all populations, the only one with one of the 5 mutations that characterized haplogroup X2A, the Native American haplotype, was one instance in Iran. Nowhere near Europe. This was even before the Altai and Evenk, Siberian evidence, shown earlier, surfaced. Here are some images of Altayan and Evenk peoples. Hardly European look. Now on to the next asinine claim.
Ancient European genetic markers have also been found in North and South American Indians using a different technique which examines protein patterns on white blood cells. These are referred to as human lymphocyte antigens, or HLAs for short. HLAs can be classified like blood types to understand genetic relationships between groups. In an extremely important and comprehensive review of the HLA research, author James Guthrie outlined ancient European and non-European markers in the Americas long before Columbus.
Next, the Eurocentrists quote James Guthrie, a chemist and author from Niara, a well-known hyperdiffusionist magazine, who likes to pretend he is a geneticist. In his so-called HLA study he claims that every people in the world visited the Americas. Afrocentrists love quoting him as well. Let's address the strength of those HLA claims. When Frank Sweet, a molecular biologist, and Richard Willems, a geneticist, were asked about Guthrie's article, they explained that the use of mtDNA and Y chromosome uses sections that are not adaptive, so that mutation and thus the distributions are due to random occurrences. HLAs, however, depend on what exposure the populations had to disease. This section of chromosome number 5 is the weapons factory for our species' eternal war against germs. Its genes produce the lymphocytes and antibodies that defend us. Because of this, it has 2 features that make it unsuitable for tracking migrations. First, it evolves and mutates at a phenomenal rate. HLA is a system which is very likely under very strong natural selection. Strong selection can alter allele frequencies very fast, 1,000 times faster than fluctuations in neutral genes usually occur. If different populations are exposed to the same infections, they will end up with similar HLAs even though they may not be related or have ever been in contact. Nearly every generation carries some new twist in this section of DNA. You can see why this must be. If it were not so, the germs would have won long ago. The most plausible explanation for the high frequency seen in Amerindians and in some other populations is random genetic drift and natural selection. Looking to some other and more neutral genetic systems such as mtDNA, there is not a slightest hint of pre-Columbian gene flow between Europe, Africa, either Sahara or Sub-Saharan alike, and the Americas. In short, the scientific experts all concur that HLA studies do not show evidence of pre-Columbian contact, or that Mr. James Guthrie has a clue.
Another important piece of evidence comes from the mitochondrial DNA research on the origin of domestic dogs in the Americas. This research shows that dogs in the Americas were originally domesticated from wolves in Europe or the Near East and not from American wolves. A paper was presented by Dr. Jennifer Leonard and colleagues at the 5th International Ancient DNA Conference in Manchester, England in July 2000. At the time, Dr. Leonard and colleagues were academicians at UCLA, in the Department of Organismic Biology, Ecology and Evolution. Since this is an extremely important paper, let's take a few minutes to analyze it in detail.
If you are going to analyze something in detail, you don't just analyze an abstract, you go look up the actual stuff.
In the abstract of that paper it was stated that, quote, "The archaeological record suggests that dogs were domesticated 12,000 to 14,000 years ago in the Near East or Europe, and that they were present in North America by 9,000 years ago. Mitochondrial DNA sequences from pre-Columbian dogs show that these animals have the same origin as Eurasian dogs. There is absolutely no evidence of either African, South Asian or Indian dog DNA suggested in these papers."
Like I said before, if you are going to analyze a subject, find out as much as you can on the subject. So an abstract doesn't cut it. When Dr. Leonard was actually contacted, she forwarded an updated copy of her studies. A 2002 version which superseded the 2000 version. Ancient DNA evidence for Old World origin of New World dogs. First, let us quote the abstract. Mitochondrial DNA sequences isolated from ancient dog remains from Latin America and Alaska showed that Native American dogs originated from multiple Old World lineages of dogs that accompanied late Pleistocene humans across the Bering Strait. Bering Strait? What? Not across the Atlantic Ocean with Solitrians? One clade of dog sequences was unique to the New World, which is consistent with a period of geographic isolation. This unique clade was absent from a large sample of modern dogs, which implies that European colonists systematically discouraged the breeding of Native American dogs. Our phylogenetic analysis suggests that minimally, about 5 founding dog lineages invaded North America with humans as they colonized the New World. The large diversity of mtDNA lineages in the dogs that colonized the New World implies that the ancestral population of dogs in Eurasia was large and well mixed at that time. Consequently, dogs, in association with humans or through trade, spread across Europe, Asia, and the New World soon after they were domesticated. Key point to remember, European Solitrians were an intensively artistic people. They painted the animals they encountered. No drawings of dogs have been found. Now, in the same issue of Science that Dr. Leonard's study was published, there was another article. In fact, the article directly preceding it. Genetic evidence for an East Asian origin of domestic dogs. Quoting that study. Greater than 95% of all sequences belong to 3 phylogenetic groups universally represented at similar frequencies, suggesting a common origin from a single gene pool for all dog populations. A larger genetic variation in East Asia than in other regions and the pattern of phylogeographic variation suggest an East Asian origin for the domestic dog, around 15,000 years ago. Wait. Can you repeat that again? Dogs have an East Asian origin? And dogs traveled from Asia to the New World? Oh, so sorry, no great white migration.